I didn't prep for this well, do I ever? I think that's, yeah.
That's awesome.
It's organic, Chris. It's not lack of planning. It's not fail to plan to fail. It's just organic. That's what organic.
That's right. In the ethos of the time, I stand behind my decision to not plan.
To remain flexible.
Hi, welcome to another episode of Consultants Saying Things. I am Chris Lockhart, joined today by Phil Yanov, Whynde, Kuehn, Oliver Cronk, talking today about the boom-bust cycle that appears to be in place with regards to talent recruitment, right? And specifically in the consulting business, this idea that business in consulting and demand for consulting services seems to be going through the roof. By some estimates, business is up, 12 to 20% at some of the major firms. And at the same time, we seem to have a real issue finding people to fill a lot of these roles. In fact, there was a survey, I'm looking at it over here on the other screen, right? 2 in 3 consulting firms say they're short-staffed, and 1 in 5 are turning down work because they can't find people, or at least that's what they're claiming the reason is. So with demand growing and it seems nobody available to do the work, the question is, if you're caught up in this, if you're a consultant and you're hired out of school during one of these boom phases, and at a certain point the cycle changes and 10,000 people are let go or whatever it may be. How do you navigate that cycle? What are some things that maybe you can do on that front? So, Oliver, I know you've lived this cycle in the past with your past experience, as have I. Wanted to get sort of your take on this, and but first of all, is this really a problem? We can't find the people because it seems like they'd be out there, right?
I think it doesn't just apply to consulting as well, right? I think it's hitting all walks of life, and there's a whole load of geopolitical kind of reasons why there's a talent issue, and you can argue whether there should or shouldn't be, but I think that there genuinely is in certain sectors, right? I think certain sectors perhaps haven't been as affected by the seismic sort of forces that COVID has sort of blown through a lot of industries. So some have stayed fairly sheltered from that. But for the industries that have, tech, consulting, healthcare, sciences, hospitality industry, airlines, etc., the ones that have been affected either with massive demand or dips in demand, I think it's caused talent to shift around. And I've lived through this, and I think the consulting firms have a number of different tricks up their sleeve now. They're starting to recruit from different places, from different avenues. But I also think, talking about the bust piece, when people kind of then get let go, I think people don't tend to struggle to go from consulting firm, particularly big consulting firm, into another role. It's a good thing to have on the CV, right, and the resume. So people tend to get snipped up. But I think it's a really interesting one, and I personally think part of the answer is to be a little bit more open-minded about who you hire and how you hire in the first place. Filtering too hard before you've even considered someone, I think, is often the problem. And whenever I've built teams, I've always been tried to be as open-minded as possible about candidates without trying to kind of park my unconscious biases or conscious biases and just assess candidates based on merit and what they're really like as a human being, rather than do they have XYZ qualification or this sort of background. So that's sort of my take on this.
A year ago, everyone was looking for work. Everyone was out there looking for work, and now it's like, where are those people? Are they still out there? Did they get hired? Now we can't find anybody. I mean, the other bit of this is, what are they calling it? The Great Resignation. Is that a term anyone's heard, or did I make that up?
Great Resignation, rooted in the Great Discontent in workplace,
right?
Otherwise,
Work environment, right? Issues with corporate culture, and like, I don't have to work at PwCs of the world and be treated like a cog in the wheel anymore. I can go and do whatever I want to do.
But Chris, do you think this is a lot of tension that's kind of had to stay stuck? Because everyone's been nervous about the uncertainty, and now there is perhaps more certainty and things are upticking, or hopefully generally going on upwards. All of a sudden that is releasing, and that pressure, and people are now going, do you know what? I am now going to be braver. I'm now going to go and stop doing this job I don't want to do. I'm going to find something new. I certainly think that seems to be a theme from my perspective.
Right. But I mean, when you have McDonald's can't find anybody, so they're resorting to robots. Now that might be because they don't pay enough or whatever, or it's a shit job, whatever it might be, right? From that end of the spectrum to McKinsey can't find anybody. Right. And that's a place people historically have wanted to go because it's a prestige thing. And it's all, so, is it just, to your point, is this like a rubber band that's snapped kind of thing? Or is it, it was really like this for the past 15 years, and it was the pandemic that broke that, shook it loose like an earthquake.
I think there's a bit of a perfect storm going on, because I think you've got to look at both the US and the UK and probably other European countries' immigration policy as well, right? Now, certainly in the UK, a big part of our problem is we can't get skilled, semi-skilled professional workers because, surprise, surprise, we cut off a large percentage of who was coming to do those jobs, as in EU workers. A lot of them have gone, and they certainly are, if they are interested in going through the visa process, it's far fewer than it was before. And so it's affecting all sectors, because people have, through the pandemic, as you've said, Chris, they've looked at other options, particularly ones that were perhaps faring better during the pandemic. So a lot of hospitality workers are now delivery drivers because they don't have to deal with the general public and how rude they are and all that sort of stuff. And they actually get a better, more secure job. So, a lot of pub owners I've spoken to and restaurant owners really struggling. So the services industry, hospitality industry is really interesting. And I guess it's filtering its way all the way through. Like you say, people are taking stock. This has been a real reboot moment, hasn't it, for everyone? I think everyone's kind of gone, do you know what? What's important to me? Well, it's actually this. It's not commuting. It's not that. It's something different. And I think it's, as you say, it's a bit of a seismic shift in the working world.
Okay, I get why McDonald's and restaurants and service workers, blah, blah, blah. So the question, I think, is, on the consulting side, is this real? I mean, is that in fact what's really going on, that they're having to turn away work, or is it just the normal amount of work they'd always turn away? And is it in fact because you can't find staff, or is it once again them trying to apply pressure to immigration policy? I mean, if I were one of the big firms, one of the things I'd want to do is be able to, bring in more talent to do this. And one of the ways I do that is to influence policy decisions for immigration policy.
And I mean, because let's be honest, right? That's one way to fill that need. I think a larger question, at least here, is why don't we have those skills? We have 340 million people in this country. How you're telling me?
Who sat home with lynda.com for 18 months? I mean, what the hell, right? I mean, I could have just done the LinkedIn learning crap and gotten this taken care of. Let me tell you, I do not see on my calls. I mean, I see lots of people hiring, and our calls are pretty well populated. I see a bunch of people on these calls. I see people looking for work. I don't see. I just don't understand how someone could say they can't get the talent they want. There are people out there looking for jobs that are qualified. I mean, with some really interesting skills. And just to reference the stuff that's on the LinkedIn, there's some real bullshit responses in that thread, by the way. I mean, this may be a thing, but I mean, and I'm sorry, just to kind of convert that back from French to English, some of the responses, right, are, I mean, this is just, these people have got some beliefs in here that just are not sustainable, right? They're unsupported beliefs. There are folks in here saying, yeah, clearly I'm being turned over because I'm too old. I hear that all the time, and it's almost always hooey, or in Oliver speak, codswallop.
How about the one like, I don't have a Harvard business degree, so therefore that's why I was overlooked for this job. Do you think that
there's
helps?
some dude who is only going to do that, and I get that. I mean, I was looking at some job description this morning, which was just kind of an entry level, not really. I mean, a kind of a low level sales position, and it said college degree and 4 years of experience. I'm going, oh my God, you got to be able to pick up a phone and talk to people for that gig. And I get it. I'd like good people, but I mean, there's just no way that it required those credentials.
I think it's a lazy approximation during the recruitment process.
Exactly.
It's basically, do you know what? I can't be bothered to actually sift or assess someone properly based on them being a human being. I'll assess them based on some random bits of letters they have after their name. And I say
Eagle
this as someone who
Scouts
has,
only may apply. Sorry.
and I say this with someone with a few letters after their name, but
yeah.
What letters do you have after your name, Oliver? Are you BDS? Like are you an orthodontist on the side?
I got a Doctor of Divinity on the wall. So D-Div.
I was going to say before I was rudely interrupted from across the pond. I was going to say I actually believe in it's cheesy, but in the University of Life and lifelong learning, I genuinely think that what's happened in many organizations is you have too many people that think the same way because they're all a lot of them are degree educated. And I actually think the people I've worked with who aren't degree educated, in fact, there's one person I know who decided to go straight into tech out of school, didn't do a degree. He is knocking out the park. He's just incredible. And has a degree held him back? Not at all. The other example I would give you is Deloitte started a Bright Starts program. So instead of requiring a university degree, they're hiring straight out of school. And again, some of the people that they've hired through that program have just been fantastic. They've not been who you would perhaps traditionally associate with working at Deloitte, but they are fantastic. They are a breath of fresh air because they come in with a completely different mindset and a different work ethic, and they work really hard, and they're just grafters, and they come at it from a different angle. And that was brilliant to see Deloitte doing that. And I think the other firms are doing it as well.
I want to get in a plug for Billy's Chowder House, just off Route 1 near Kittery, Maine.
Really?
Do they give you some substantial discount or something?
No, I just have this coffee cup, and every time I bring it out, I feel like it's an advert.
I think people are going back to work and making different choices, being in the driver's seat a little bit more, right? There's this, survey by Gallup out there that talks about the Great Resignation being underpinned by the Great Discontent. So workplace issues are underpinning, I think, a lot of people's choices. And so they may be making entirely different choices, right? It's not just all, here's the pool of people that are waiting to go back and then they're going back in different places. We're just doing different stuff. I think for people who, if I put myself in the position of a consultant and thinking about how we navigate things like this, I think part of it's being flexible. I remember losing job way back when. I won't date myself, but for me, it was easier to get a job as a contractor than find an employee. So I flex. Or maybe this time also, has us rethink the companies we work for. Maybe there are smaller or mid-sized consulting firms that handle demand different, handle clients different. So even that potentially could be leading to some different choices.
Yeah, that's an interesting bit, right? Maybe a side gig is a good way to sort of even out the booms and busts. I don't know, Phil, you deal with people looking in the gig industry a lot too. I don't know what your thoughts might be.
Yeah. I mean, the thing is, I see both lots of demand, but I see lots of people looking for work, right? I mean, there's all our events that we're running every week that I see. I'm jumping into clubhouse rooms where I see a couple of hundred people looking for work at a time, talking about what their credentials are, et cetera. I mean, I think, I'm not sure. I mean, I'm not the guy coming at this from an economic standpoint. I'm just saying when I look around, I see lots of people looking for work. And it seems to me that it's always been a matching market, right? You just have to get those people all connected at the right time. And there have been things that have put friction and kind of disconnected folks inside that space, right? Inability to travel. And I mean, whether that is travel for work or travel for the interview, et cetera. And I think people have tried, are trying to figure those pieces out. But I think there's a lot of people out there, and this might still, I think this is probably still a pretty good gig. And the other thing is, in this space, it's the range of jobs is so wide, right? A lot of places require a lot of on-site time. Some require very little. I mean, I just was talking to a guy this week who said, yeah, our office, big corporate office, global corporation, they just said, yeah, indefinitely postponing returning to the office. We don't know when that's going to be. And they're in the States.
There's this sort of other thread, when we talked to Ian a couple of weeks ago, or whenever that was, July, whenever that was, a couple episodes ago, I should say. Let me rephrase that. When
Check
we talk
the show notes, yeah,
show notes. Thank you. They're over here somewhere. So when we talked to Ian a couple episodes ago about young people in consulting, is there maybe an element here of look, the pandemic COVID sort of opened up new opportunities for people to kind of do entrepreneurial things. And at the same time, you have younger people that maybe aren't willing to wait as long, right? So there's like an impatience factor with like, I'm not gonna wait 10 years to become partner at McKinsey when I can go out and invent my own unicorn.com and sell it to somebody, right? Is that an element?
I think there's definitely an element of there is a different sort of set of aspirations and drivers for the latest generation coming to the workplace. And again, I don't want to sound like an old fart, a boring old middle-aged. Now I've kind of hit 40, I can kind of put myself in the, I can no longer be in denial. I'm definitely in the boring middle-aged category. But
you're the youngest here. Except for Whynde, who obviously is ageless.
Right.
I like to think I'm young, but I guess my point is, the new entrants, and I've actually just been working with some interns, some marketing interns at my place, and it's just quite interesting to sort of see the difference in work-life balance. I think COVID has also, for new people coming into the workplace, they're coming in with a different sort of reset expectation, I think, on what they want out of a job. And I think McKinsey, sure, it's a very bright light to go and work for. Perhaps for those of us on the call, perhaps that's somewhere we hold in high regard. But perhaps for a younger worker, it's like, do you know what? How much of my life am I going to have to give away? It may be a very exciting, prestigious place, but actually, how much of my social life, how much of my life am I going to have to sort of sacrifice in order to make partner somewhere like that? And you're right, Chris. Do I want to do all of that for a firm? Well, actually, I've got a bunch of great ideas, and I back myself, and I'm going to go out on my own, and I'm going to do something. Particularly when you think about, you were saying earlier, some service industries perhaps can be roboticized. I would argue that some consulting jobs also can be as well.
I think a lot of
controversial statement, but there is
the managing director role, right? That could be totally automated.
Well, that's not that you joke, but there are a whole load of things about people whose bosses are now AI. And I have to dig out the article, but it's not a million miles away. I know it sounds a bit science fiction, but some decision-based jobs of data, analysis and decisioning sort of jobs, actually, you could argue are better done by someone who doesn't have the human side to, do you know what? I have a preference for Anna, and I have a preference for Steve over. But actually, if you look at the hard data, maybe John is the one that's doing the better sales role. Or it's I kind of jest, and we're not there quite yet. But there is definitely an element to which consulting is. There's some grunt pieces of consulting, isn't there? There's like data gathering, data crunching, and doing all that stuff. And a lot of that, I think, can potentially be automated. It's a bit of a taboo topic, and I'm sure it'll get some reactions here. But that's
well, and I think you're right, because we could go down the road of, look, we have robotic process automation. We have business process management engines. We have rules engine. We have all these things to automate decision making that used to be done by humans. So I get where that's going. And by the way, one of my favorite anecdotes is the story of the mid-level consultant who's working on a financial model in Excel, and the partner says, how much longer will it take for you to finish that? It's like, well, an hour. Well, what if I help you? Well, then it's 3 hours, right?
Nice.
Is that actual or billable?
Well, that's 40 hours. That's 40 hours.
That's right.
Yeah, go ahead. Sorry, Whynde.
As I say, Oliver, I think this is a really important point, and I'd like to take it in a different direction as well. Not just thinking about automation, but in terms of the business model, does it have to be a full-time consultant doing that stuff? Or can we, as a service, right, can we break up those pieces differently? Which also may help, back to one of Phil's points, can we have this whole range of jobs where someone who wants to work at home can opt into jobs like that, or maybe work on a contract basis, whatever it is. So I think part of the answer to solving this boom and bust on both sides, for companies and for the consultants, is having different models in place that allow that. Oliver, also, I think your point about younger generations is spot on. And I think another big driver, workplace, absolutely, and the work-life balance, but also purpose. Working for a really big consulting firm and just contributing to somebody else and that cause, I don't think is as meaningful to people.
Yeah. Let's talk a bit about culture, right? Because I think, in part, people are, I'm going to put out a hypothesis here, right? That perhaps, younger people are leaving giant accounting firms in part because they feel like a number. They feel like, maybe the firm is not adhering to its, announced ideals, right? And those sorts of things. So there's a cultural aspect here too, right? I mean, who wants to work for a big evil corporation? Probably nobody, where you're just a number in a machine, right?
Also, added to that, think about the benefits of the mentoring and the shadowing that you got when you were in the workplace. In a physical workplace, you had loads of serendipitous opportunities to learn and network and connect. Now, you might as well work for a really small firm because everyone's remote, and actually the ecosystem and the boundary between who's an internal sort of employee and who is a supplier or a partner, and I mean partner in terms of supplier partner rather than consulting partner, has really blurred the line. So actually, if I'm a new entrant into the world of consulting, would I actually rather go and work for a niche company? And to Chris, to your point, who is all about purpose and is actually maybe about the green economy or sustainability, rather than working for the big corporate and being lost in the machine at a time actually where I'm not getting the benefit of being part of that big organization.
It's almost like a fear of missing out, isn't it, Phil? Right? Like, this is a great time. We've talked about this a number of times. This is a great disruption, right? A great time of opportunity. And who wants to be lost in a 400,000 person company?
Well, I think it depends on where you are in your career, quite frankly. I mean, and there's a couple of reasons people take any job, but I think in the early stages, you should be taking a job. I mean, you're going to earn a paycheck, but you can learn. And I think you should be picking the places you can learn the most, right? Where am I going to hang around high quality people doing really interesting stuff so that I can learn from them and build some great work habits and some great ideas and some great connections. So I really think that, this is an incredible time, because someone took the whole playing field and just shook it up, right? And now it's all like, well, where do I land? Well, guess what? I've got a little bit of control. I mean, maybe not perfect control, but I have more control than I've ever had before, because the pieces got shaken out of the slots. And so I might be able to go find myself in a place I wasn't before. I think it's an interesting spot.
So do people now, so this great reshuffling of the deck, right? Do people know how to take advantage of that? Because, listen,
how would they? Have we ever taught them to do that, right? I mean,
right? We have this programmatic education system. You will do this. You will go through all this. You will be in the cookie cutter. You will be. It's like Charlie Chaplin.
How do you break out of the matrix? How do you take the blue pill or whatever the right pill is to kind of escape as you say, the sausage machine that you're on, right? and find a new path?
I'm thinking it's Charlie Chaplin or Buster Keaton, where he gets caught in the machine and he's like rolling around through do you know what I'm talking about? The talkie back in my day, when whatever.
Yeah. First movie I ever saw. Yeah.
I was in that movie. So yeah, but it's this idea that like they don't know how to take advantage, because it's like, but I went to college. I got a 4-year degree. Where's my $100,000 job? Right. I have a sense that there are some of those people. I think, the really entrepreneurial type of people are doing things. And Phil, we know some of those people locally, like doing, when there was a shortage of ventilators and a shortage of masks, it's like, oh, I'm going to put all my makers onto manufacturing these things and shipping them out, and they ship thousands of them out and that sort of thing. So I think there are those sorts of people, but why can't we find them for the jobs that these companies apparently want to fill? Right? It's bizarre to me. Let me ask you this. Does this give like the employee or the consultant or the worker, right, it gives them more leverage, doesn't it? Or does it over a company?
I think it depends on how niche your area is and how in demand it is. I think if you are in, the semi-skilled space where there's a lot of competition for roles, I don't think it gives you so much control. But I think if you are in some of the roles I talked about earlier that are massively in demand, then I think certainly the power has perhaps shifted. However, my concern is with all the moving parts moving around, I still don't think it still hasn't settled yet. And by that, a big part of that, I mean, is what does this mean for working anywhere? If someone can work from anywhere, work remotely, does that no longer mean they have to be in country or particularly local? And therefore, are you starting to compete globally? So all of a sudden, perhaps, if you're a technical consultant within East Coast US, maybe there's a finite pool of you. All of a sudden, if the job market truly goes global and you're now competing against every technical consultant globally, does that actually eventually catch up with you and depress your wage or your earning capability down to what it is at a global level? So that is the bit I don't think has quite worked through yet. And I think people are still waiting to see how it works. And of course, we've had outsourcing initiatives before, and there's been a bit of a backlash against some of those. So it will be interesting to see which way the pendulum sort of swings on this one.
There are certain factors, to your point, Oliver, if you're niche, you can pave your way a little bit more, but within a range, right? So maybe where companies are really hungry now, you can get some more compensation or you can get some more workplace flexibility, but I don't know that it will still fundamentally give you more leverage or change really what that job is. And I don't think we've gone deep enough in experiencing the pandemic and what work's going to look like to really change it fully yet.
I'm just going to beat up PwC today instead of Deloitte. You're welcome, Oliver. Can a PwC say to its people that it's bringing in to fill these needs that it has? We're back on the 5-day on-site work week, and you analyst you will fly out Sunday night and you will fly home Friday night, like in the bad old days, right? Like can they afford to do that? Or is there more of now we're offering flex and you can do this? And
well, in the UK, they've already come out pretty much and said, this is the end of the old work patterns. Most of the big four have come out publicly and said, our employees can work from anywhere. Now, the cynic in me says, that's a great piece of PR. The reality on a project is you will work where the project or the client requires you to work. Sure. So I think, maybe if you're on the bench or you're training or whatever, then there's some more flexibility there. But I think it's all well and good, saying some of these things. But I think the reality, I think when things kind of perhaps go back to more normality, I suspect it will look more similar. But people's eyes have been opened to a different way. And people will now have got used to the fact consultants don't have to be on site. I mean, to give you a specific of this is for a long time, what was deemed really high risk cybersecurity consulting work, changes to firewalls, changes to security appliances and policies were deemed on-prem activities only, right? Lots of people have spoken to me about this. Like before the pandemic, I actually had to be in the server room or in the security operating center to make those changes. All of a sudden, we've managed to make a way to make this secure and deal with the risks of it and actually do it remotely. So some of this stuff has changed, and I'm sure will continue to sort of change, but I think it depends whether the old school mentality kicks in or whether the big firms suffer from a lack of new incoming sort of fresh talent and therefore they become more and more old school in their thinking, or whether they can truly sort of embrace these changes.
Now, I think you're old school now, aren't you, Oliver? Did you miss a birthday?
I'm feeling increasingly old school. Yeah. Over the hill, old school. Yeah.
Nice.
So how do you navigate that if you're looking for one of these jobs?
How do you, as a potential employee, navigate the bad decisions of your potential employer and their inability to plan? I guess you need better questions during the interview process. All of us should know, right? That, I mean, if at some point in your career, you realize, hopefully, and earlier is better, that when you are in that interview process, you are interviewing the company as much as they are interviewing you, right?
Absolutely.
There are things, you've got things you are trying to get done, I hope. There are things you're trying to learn. There are types of clients you'd like to be in. There are industries you may want to explore. Again, you got to figure out, and you have your own ideas about what work means to you, right? I mean, what is my work pattern going to be, as we talked about? Am I on site, or am I going to be able to remote? And am I going to be, 20 days on and 2 days off, or how is that piece going to work, right? And how many on days do I have to off days and all that kind of stuff? So I think you have to figure out who you want to work with. You have to ask those questions. And I think it's really easy in the beginning part of your career to walk in and not realize you don't know anything. Ask. You have to ask all of that stuff. I mean, later on, all of us, if any of us were walking into a job interview today, we'd ask all kinds of questions, because we have been bit and burned every way imaginable by now, right?
I have no idea what you're talking about. No idea what you're talking about. Yeah.
Oliver, didn't you say you fell through a trap door one time or something?
Does your company have an oubliette?
I'm not talking about my career. I'm not talking about my career at all. No, carry on.
He was defenestrated.
Wow, that too. We get to work in a French and an Italian term for being killed or wiped out.
The defenestration of Prague, right? That's where there's a history bit there.
Thrown out of a window. Yeah. No. So I mean, there's all kinds of things that go wrong, and I mean, we see this all the time. You just pull the LinkedIn stuff, and so you have to figure out those pieces and say, how do you deal with this, and find other folks and say what's worked well and what's not worked well. But I do think there's just a ton of opportunity out there, and yes, employers always complain that the drought is where they are, right? Oh, we can never find anybody. Well, you could have started sooner. You could have kept the pot bubbling along the way. I mean, you're a big organization. You're sophisticated. Let's not say at the last moment, I need a VP of X, because that just popped up today. No, it was coming. All that was happening. You saw it. The dude announced his retirement 9 months ago. There were lots of ways for you to figure it out. Anyway, I think this is a good time. I think it feels really weird. And I think the thing for us to do in this space, or the advice I would give to anybody, is say, just assume you don't know and play the person who's just going to ask questions. This is a good time to be the one who just says, I don't know, tell me, how does that work?
So we should be perfectly transparent here, right? The genesis of this discussion was really a LinkedIn post by Monica Fike at one of the editors at LinkedIn News, who posted, it was called "Consulting Boom and Bust," something to that effect, right? And in this, it's like it's all the things that we've been talking about, but the responses, right, in the thread are eye-opening, to say the least, right? You got
it's a Rorschach test for what people think is wrong with the world, really. I mean, it's there's people saying, these aren't the best firms to work for. You should be a freelancer. You should work at a boutique firm. People who are entry level don't have the right skills, right? It's this whole right. I just find it interesting because that's not where I would have gone. I would have gone with, well, people just don't want to work at these companies. So doesn't that put the onus on the corporate culture to shift a little bit, to take into account things that people really care about, and not just value signal with a nice commercial about how great PwC is? It's like, no, live the values if that's what you believe is going to attract the talent that you want to have. Because I don't. Aren't they? Here's my question: aren't some of these guys creating opportunity anyway? I mean, it's because it's like you said. As you look at this article and you look at the responses, I mean, some people say, "Oh, these are terrible places to work," and you can go to a Harvard Business Review article which says the exact counterpoints, right? Here are the 4 best places to work, and here's the list, or et cetera, or Vault, or somebody else is reviewing them, and remember, I am the guy who knows that the plural of anecdote is not data. But just this, in the past few weeks, I've got a friend who left small business consulting to take on a gig with Capgemini. And he is just overwhelmed with the opportunity in that space. He's like, oh my God, there's so many smart people here. And there's a chance for me to work with this team or that team or that team. I mean, and he is a super smart cat in a place. He's just never worked in that environment before. And he's kind of overwhelmed with opportunity. So, I mean, like I said, aren't we all just in different spots?
A totally different topic, but what about blaming the client, right? There's this idea that, you know what, they really don't want to change, and people are just fed up with working with clients that really have no interest in changing or following the consultant's advice, right? Or and you've probably been on these projects where you spend 8 months or whatever doing something, and at the end it's like, wow, that was really interesting. Thank you very much. Have a nice day, right? And all of that, it's like, well, what did I just spend all that time doing? Right? Why would I want to do that? I want to do something that has meaningful impact. And maybe that's only possible to do in some of these entrepreneurial things or smaller companies or I don't know, whatever. Right?
If you are looking to the outside world to make you happy, you are in for disappointment.
Yes.
Oh, that's a very cynical.
Was that Marcus Aurelius? Who said that?
You're planning. It's just got to be this. I'm here to work. I do this thing. I'm off to do the thing I was meant to do, but I got all these other things in my life. I think they're in this space. I understand. I want to do something meaningful. I always feel like from a value standpoint, for me, I want to do impact. I want to impact others, right? Those are high value activities for me. Take that small list and see, can I do this here? Are other people doing it there? Can I find someone and, find someone successful and draft them, right? Go with them.
And as we're saying here, right, individuals should make the choices of a firm for wherever you are at your stage and what you want to get out of it. And that can really shift over time. But in terms of the clients, I don't know that I can ever blame clients for anything, because as consultants, we're in a position to influence those things. We're in a position to influence everything from the conditions that the consultants work in to how they think about business. So, we can and should be shaping that. I think a challenge is obviously managing the demand too. In the pandemic's a great example, like the sort of rubber band of, okay, and now we're ready to go and we need all these people, which again, I think gets back to some of the things we were saying earlier, because I think firms need to do a better job of managing the pool. We've all worked in consulting firms. We know what it's like to keep people warm, but especially if you're laying people off, can we do a better job of managing the pool so when it's time to hit the button and bring people in, we can do that more easily, right? About the matching.
Yeah, I'm curious, Whynde, in your own space. One of the threads of comments that we've seen inside these LinkedIn is they said they felt like consulting firms were valuing margin over other things, and this caused them to be in that place where they were putting people in and taking them out, putting them in and taking them out, basically treating them like cogs, because basically they're trying to show a certain revenue, or in this case, margin. Is that something that you see? Do you think that's one of the things that's causing this problem?
Good question. I actually left a firm for that. But when I was at that firm, I did everything I could to shelter my team from those dynamics. Perhaps there is some of that as part of our broader conversation here. People don't want to feel like they're cogs. They have more options. I think they will indeed go pursue them. Yeah.
Nothing to make you feel like that than being part of a downsizing, right? And that popped just like that. You realize, I guess I wasn't I remember a guy one time, and I worked with a whole bunch of guys who came out of the IBM consulting side, right? And so utilization was everything right there, right? They were talking about how do they keep people, et cetera. But I remember one of the guys, when he got let go, he said, there won't even be a hole in the water. It's just, I'm just poof, I'm gone, and that's it. And that's the way these things work. And he was off to somebody else.
It is quite sad though, seeing some business units within consulting firms just manage on the numbers, and the number one priority is utilization. Are you 80% plus utilized? And if you're not, I don't care who you are, you're gone. I have seen things be that ruthless, and it's just, it's sad to me. I guess I care as much about what I do as the sort of commercial aspect of it. And I know not everyone is like that. So But I think you've kind of lost the plot a little bit if you are just boiling it down to numbers, because these are people we're talking about. They're people with real lives, and if you just treat them like numbers and you treat them like machines, quite frankly, then why are you surprised when they don't feel valued and you haven't invested in them, or you haven't sort of looked at how you diversify their experience on different projects or different clients so that they are more deployable on future engagements? So I think the organizations that really just lose the plot and just focus strictly on metrics and am I projecting in the right way, without thinking about the other aspects of the team and the culture, I think are the ones that are very short-termist and may have some commercial successes and some margin successes in the short term, and maybe sure that'll get you promoted to director or get you promoted to partner, but actually then in a couple of years when you look around, who is still with you on the journey, or have people got off because they've realized your game, you're just sweating them for numbers.
Well, on that thread, right? It's just real quick. It's, this whole thing of, maybe the right metric, maybe utilization is important. Obviously, you have to make money, but, maybe the other metric they should really be tracking is turnover, right? It's like, if I'm the only guy left of my, starting class after 5 years, there might be a problem, right? With retention, because it's not just talent acquisition. It's also talent retention. You can do the acquisition. You're having a hard time doing the retention, right? And that seems to be a problem.
Utilization, I think, is also a challenge and starting to feel slightly irrelevant when value is the measurement stick as well, which again gets to how we shape the deals, right? Because how we shape the deals with clients, and we're not just renting people's time, will flow through, I think, to happier people.
Right. That's bang on, because you're absolutely right. You could have someone who is 90% utilized, but actually if their outcomes on projects and their value is very minimal, then actually it's completely the wrong metric to be measuring in the first place, particularly in an era where perhaps things are moving away from time-based billing to value-based billing. So no, absolutely bang on, Whynde.
Yeah, but I spent 100 hours this week on it. Yeah, but it's shit, right? The client hates it.
It's busy work.
It's meaningless. Look at all the slides I created. Yeah, but nobody cares.
Yeah.
Again, we always try to boil this down to can we help somebody, right, it's stuck in this sort of machine, get out of the machine or avoid getting in the machine or do something else. So I kind of want to bring it back and just sort of ask each one of you, so is there one takeaway or, a thread that you would advise, Oliver, if you're talking to people that are entering a firm that you previously worked for as a young analyst? Do you have any advice for them based on where we are in the market cycle and some of these things?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a few things, but the ones that sort of spring to mind are really understand what you're getting into and why you're doing it, right? So understand the business unit, what they're driven on, and is that compatible with your what drives you? If you're not a pure numbers person, does it make sense to go into a business unit that maybe look very prestigious on the CV, but actually unless you're planning to make it a short in and out, and then you're going to hop somewhere else, it's kind of thinking about, do your values match with where you're going, which is pretty standard sort of advice for someone's career anyway. But the other thing I think is, don't always assume that some other smaller firm is going to be easier, because actually, my experience of working in startups was that you are expected to be a multidisciplinary one-man band, and that can equally be stressful and difficult and demanding. So I think it's just sort of about working out, what do you have to give? Does that kind of match up with what's expected? But also, don't, as to your point earlier, don't just get sucked along the factory production line. Is there actually an opportunity to do something different? Can you take your skill set and take it to a different sector or a different type of organization than perhaps you've always thought about? Would that be a better pathway, particularly if you care about your work-life balance or you care about purpose rather than just the bottom line?
I think the answer to this is an overall answer anyway, which is treat your your career, treat your life as a journey, not a job and a set of jobs, and to be deliberate about it. That can be hard when you're just starting out on your career. So I think there's a matter of following your bliss and following sort of what interests you and where you enjoy, and making yourself more and more valuable. The more valuable you are, I think the more unique skill sets you have, the better you are going to be able to weather these sorts of things. But wherever you are at whatever point in time, whether you want to join a big firm and become a partner, do that because you're doing it because you want to be deliberate and that's what you want to do. I think back to that amazing conversation we had with Ian. And I loved how he had all this different experience that I think is going to make him a better consultant or a better whatever he wants to do. And I think building that collection and flexing to do different things is best overall. But whatever you do, just be deliberate, right? Be intentional.
Phil, thoughts?
Yeah, I think,
cats. Cats out there. What are you going to tell the cats?
I do know cats out there. And I'm going to say that, Whynde went right where I was going to go with this thing, or where I still want to go. And I think it's important. I'm reminded of that quote by Alain de Botton that said, marriage is a hopeful, generous, infinitely kind gamble taken by two people who don't know yet who they are or who they might be. And they're binding themselves to a future they cannot conceive of, and they have carefully omitted to investigate. I don't think we know what we're getting into most of the time. We got to get that figured out as we go along. And
still talking about marriage, or what are we talking about?
Getting in and out of a job is a little easier. But the idea is to get in and figure these things out and say, I'm here to learn. What can I learn? Is this thing serving me? And hang out for as long as that can make it work. And then figure, is your journey going to take you someplace else? It's a group of friends. It's a group of coworkers and co-conspirators in your future. And I think you want to be hanging out with the best possible people. And best is whatever that means for you.
Here's what I want to talk about here, real briefly.
Oh, yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. Don't do this. That would be my advice. Right? Because, this to me is like no different than the cycle that we're talking about. You look at, he's trying to get ahead, can't get ahead. Things are coming faster than, right? And then what happens? You get sucked into the machine. Right? And this idea that we're working for companies that don't plan their business cycle really effectively. I think this happened to me once. How do I avoid doing that? Because that will kill you, right? This whole thing of trying to stay ahead or making partner in 8 years instead of 10 or whatever, it'll kill you. It really will. I mean, it will impact your health and your relationships and everything. And if you want a family, good luck, right? You might end up with 2 or 3, like most of the partners I know, right? And so, this whole idea of like just trying to keep up is crazy. And so I totally endorse this idea of figure out what you want. And we do a real piss poor job letting people or educating people on how to figure that out. What do you want out of life? And then how do you go get it? And I think, asking the questions, et cetera, is a good idea.
Yeah, I think that's great. It just occurred to me that a too on the nose interview question would be to say, at this consulting firm, do the senior partners' adult children still speak to them?
That would be pretty interview terminating, I think, but it would be a great question to ask. Yeah.
But do you understand the point? I mean, we all get the point, and we all understand why we can't ask that question. But the question is, what is it you are, or what is it you're trying to, or would you sacrifice in this? I mean, what is it you want to get?
Well, listen, guys, I appreciate it. Thank you for the conversation. Whynde, it was great to see you as always. Oliver, good to see you. I'm glad you're back from Wales in one piece. No major accidents, biking the mountains. Did you learn any longest words in the English language or anything like that?
I am shamefully bad at being able to speak any kind of Welsh town name. So yeah, I don't even try. Just to stop embarrassment, I just say, look, that place over there.
Phil Yanov, always good to see you. Even close up, when you're super close up like that, it's really good to see you also.
Thank you. Thank you.
So I'm Chris Lockhart. By the way, I've been drinking out of this coffee cup here. This is Billy's Chowder House right off of Route 1, just south of Kennebunkport, Maine. You should try their chowder. They also have haddock chowder, which is also quite good. So
one day they will pay you for your endorsement. keep dreaming until that day, Chris.
Thanks, guys. I'm Chris Lockhart. We'll see everybody next time.